The DJI RS3 versus the Weebill 3S. These are two compact gimbals that can hold full-frame mirrorless cameras. Although they're very similar, there are some differences that may convince you to get one over the other. And by the end of this video, you have a better idea on which one will suit you best. This video is not going to be a stability comparison. In my experience, after using these for a few months, they're both very steady and have very strong motors. So this video will focus on the features and the overall user experience. And as we go through this video, I'll be awarding points, gimbal points to be exact.
Hey, this sounds like fun.
So which gimbal do you think will get the most gimbal points by the end of this video? Let me know in the comments below right now. Pause this video. Let me know and let's see if you are right by the end of this video. These two gimbals are direct competitors of each other. Note that on the DJI side of things, there's also an RS3 Pro, which is more expensive and handles a heavier payload, and there's also the DJI RS3 Mini. In this video, we'll be focusing on the DJI RS3, which kind of sits very nicely in the middle between those two other gimbals. On the ZHIYUN side of things, we'll be talking about the ZHIYUN WEEBILL 3S, which sits below the ZHIYUN Crane 4 and it sits above the ZHIYUN Crane M3S. The Weebill 3S is also the upgraded version from the Weebill 3. And I have to tell you that if I was comparing the Weebill 3 with the RS3 would have been a very clear winner, but the Weebill 3S has quite a few things that I actually enjoy. But we'll be talking about these just in a bit. So first things first, pricing. This is a major consideration for many people when looking for a gimbal to buy. So at the time of the recording of this video, the DJI RS3 combo version that comes with the briefcase mode handle is $719 US, whereas the ZHIYUN WEEBILL 3S, also the combo version that comes with the sling grip, is $439 US. And for this, the Weebill 3S gets the first gimbal point. Also, before we continue, if you are enjoying this video, please hit the like button, subscribe if you haven't already. If you're watching this right now, it means that other videos from me might also be useful to you. So it would be greatly appreciated if you hit the subscribe button. And if you are already subscribed and you came back, it's great to see you back here again. The DJI RS3 has a weight of only 2.2 pounds and can support a payload of 6.6 pounds. It can support pretty comfortably a full-frame mirrorless camera with a 24-70 zoom lens. The Weebill 3S weighs 2.4 pounds, and although ZHIYUN doesn't say whether there is a payload for this, they do give you a full list of camera and lens combinations that are supported by this gimbal. So a full frame mirrorless camera plus a 24-70 lens is also a no problem for this gimbal. So in this regard, they're both pretty similar, so they both get a gimbal point. The RS3 has a battery runtime of 12 hours and a charge time of about 2.5 hours. The Weebill 3S has a battery time of about 11.5 hours and a charge time of 2 hours. And that is via fast PD charge for both gimbals. They're pretty similar in this regard, so another point for each of them. However, the RS3's handle is actually the battery as well, and you can physically check to see how much battery you have left on the gimbal without having to turn on the gimbal. You can also purchase an extra battery, so you can just swap it up if you want it uninterrupted filming. So for that, the RS3 gets 1 gimbal point. I find that the handle on the RS3 is a little bit too thick and not as comfortable as the one on the Weebill 3S. For me, it feels easier to hold the Weebill 3S and to access the joystick while holding the gimbal with one hand. The Weebill 3S also gets a wrist rest, which actually makes the shooting experience a little bit more comfortable actually. You can even adjust the tilt angle of that wrist rest, so for that, the ZHIYUN WEEBILL 3S gets a gimbal point. When it comes to the quality of the buttons though, the ones on the DJI RS3 feel a little bit more sturdy and a little bit better built. They feel a little bit more responsive, even comparing the trigger button at the front. It feels a little bit better built than the one on the Weebill 3S. On the Weebill 3S, the buttons just don't feel as high quality. There's also a quick physical toggle between certain modes on the DJI RS3 that the Weebill 3S doesn't have. And on the RS3, you can also just hold the trigger button and that will lock the gimbal position, as opposed to on the Weebill 3S, which you have to go into the different modes and find the locked mode. So an extra step if you wanted to lock that gimbal. So for all of this, the RS3 gets an extra point. You're able to lock all 3 axes on both gimbals, and that is very simple to do. The biggest difference though on the RS3 that I find very cool is that it has an auto lock feature. As long as you have previously balanced the camera, you can just leave it mounted on the gimbal, and once you're ready to shoot, you can power it on and it'll spring into life. And once you're done shooting, you can turn it off and it'll fold back into its locking position, which is really cool. If you don't like that, you can also disable it. When it comes to balancing, you also get this extra knob to fine tune some of that balance on the RS3. So for all of this, the RS3 gets a gimbal point. You can start and stop recording on your camera wirelessly by just pressing that record button on both of these gimbals. But from my experience, I found that with the RS3, the connection was actually quite stable, and even after not using the gimbal for about a week, when I came back in and used it again, the gimbal was already paired with the camera. On the Weebill 3S, I found myself having to reconnect every now and then, and sometimes even after just turning off the camera and turning it back on, sometimes that connection would be lost and I have to go back again and reconnect. And there have been a few instances where I wasn't even able to connect at all. I'm not sure if this is a firmware issue or something that could be addressed in the future, but for that, the RS3 gets another point. Both of these gimbals have an extra handle that you can attach to the gimbal to let you do an undersling or an underslug mode. The one on the RS3 is quite sturdy but not as minimalistic or as small as the one on the Weebill 3S. It is aligned to the center of gravity of that gimbal, which is nice, but on the Weebill 3S, you're able to adjust the sling grip. So you're able to move it all the way to the center to align it with the center of that gimbal, or you can move it to the side and sort of get like a two-handed grip, which for myself, it felt quite comfortable using the gimbal with 2 hands in a two-handed mode over extended periods of shooting time. You can also extend the sling grip on the Weebill 3S, so for that, the Weebill 3S gets a gimbal point. I really love the 2-in-1 quick release plate on the RS3. It has a 2-in-1 Arca Manfrotto plate, which allows you to quickly go from gimbal to tripod depending on the system that you use. There's also this little screw that allows you to just quickly lock the plate to the camera, which makes this so convenient. On the Weebill 3, the plate system is a little bit more clunky. You have to actually screw on the Arca Swiss plate to the Manfrotto plate, and the process is quite slow, especially if you are using an Arca Swiss system. If you're using a Manfrotto system, you can just attach that once and set and forget. So the process will be really quick for you if you are using a Manfrotto long plate system. So for that, the RS3 gets another point. The Weebill 3S has this option which allows you to slide part of the plate of the gimbal and attach it in a different way so you can get vertical shooting right away. You have to do some tweaks in the balance again, but the good thing is that you don't have to use any external camera cages that will allow you to do horizontal and vertical shooting that you would need if you were to do vertical shooting on the RS3. So for that, the Weebill 3S gets an extra point. ZHIYUN, I think, is probably the first company that has included fill lights in their gimbals, and the Weebill 3S is no exception. So you get a fill light that has a maximum lux output of 1000, and it is bicolor that goes from 2600 Kelvin to 5500 Kelvin. It is also dimmable, and this light can actually come in quite handy, quite clutch in low light scenarios or when you just need just a bit more light to film whatever you're filming. So for this, the Weebill 3S gets a gimbal point. The screen on the RS3 is bigger and it's also touchscreen. It is also more user-friendly and visual than that on the Weebill 3S, where it just has text and it's not touchscreen, and navigating that menu is a little bit slower. So for that, the RS3 gets another point. So let's tally up all the points, and the RS3 is the winner, but by just a small margin. But having used both gimbals for a few months now, I have to say that I'm very happy with both gimbals. I like certain features on each of these gimbals, and there are certain things about each of these gimbals that also annoy me from time to time while I'm filming. So needless to say, there isn't a perfect gimbal out there, for me at least not yet. but they both have their pros and cons. So I hope this video was useful and informative to you, so you can look at the different features and the comparisons and determine which of these two gimbals will be better suited for your use case scenarios. And if you want to find out more, here are a couple other videos on other gimbals that you might find interesting. So make sure you head on to one of these, and I'll see you there.